Welcome all to the 25th of November 2024 Council meeting. I open the meeting at 7 p.m. Our meeting is being held on the traditional land of the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people, and on behalf of Banyule City Council, we're just having a beep. Okay, I'll keep going. I wish to acknowledge them as the traditional custodians. I would also like to pay my respects to the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung elders, past, present and emerging, and to acknowledge other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander elders joining us today. Our community is made up of diverse cultures, beliefs, abilities, bodies, sexualities, ages and genders. We are committed to access, equity, participation and rights for everyone, principles which empower, foster harmony and increase the well-being of an inclusive community. I will now pass you on to the Chief Executive Officer, Ms Alison Beckwith, who will read out the formalities.
Thank you, Mayor. Welcome all to this ordinary meeting of Council. As the Mayor indicated, my name is Alison Beckwith and I'm the Chief Executive Officer here at Banyule. Tonight's meeting is being held in person in accordance with the provision of Council's governance rules and the Local Government Act 2020. The meeting is also being live streamed via Council's website and Facebook page. The live stream is not interactive. Any comments or private messages directed to us while the stream is live will not be presented to the Council group or have any bearing on the conduct of tonight's meeting. Council's request to speak methods continue to allow participation of our residents without having to attend meetings in person. I'll just take you through some rules of our public participation for tonight's meeting. Public question time will occur at the conclusion of the meeting. If a member of the public who submitted a question is present, they are welcome to read their question as submitted or have the question read out on their behalf by a staff member. If not present at the time, the question will not be read out. All public questions and responses will be included in the meeting minutes, including those that aren't read out this evening. No statement may be derogatory, defamatory or directed to an individual councillor, member of staff, ratepayer or member of the public. A 2-minute time limit does apply for anyone that has requested to speak tonight. The timer will be used and a warning will sound at the 1.5 minute mark where we ask you to sum up for that last 30 seconds, or if indeed a statement is being read out by staff, they will also sum up. We ask that members of the gallery please check your phones and ensure that they're either switched off or on silent mode to avoid any disruptions. I would also like to remind everyone that Council has a zero tolerance for any form of bullying, harassment or violence. Everyone present in the gallery, community, members of staff, councillors are expected to respect the individual views of all others irrespective of their own view held and respectfully being able to participate in the Council meeting. If any members of the public choose to depart the chamber whilst the meeting is still in progress, you're welcome to do so, but we do ask kindly that you don't hold conversations outside in the foyer or in the stairwell, and please refrain to be outside the building. As beautiful as this building is and its heritage listed status, the noise does reverberate inside to the chamber and affects the stream and those listening at home. So I thank you in advance for that. I will now introduce you to the councillors who are in attendance tonight, and I will start to my left. We have Councillor Matt Wood, we have Councillor Alicia Curry, Councillor Mary O'Kane and Councillor Alison Champion. And my councillor colleagues to my right, we have the Mayor, Councillor Elizabeth Neely, the Deputy Mayor, Councillor Peter Castaldo, Councillor Rick Garotti, Councillor Alida McKern and Councillor Mark Di Pasquale. The Council group is also joined with the executive team. We have Mark Gilio, Director of Corporate Services, Darren Bennett, Director of Assets and City Services, Joseph Tobacco, Director of Community Wellbeing, and Natasha Swan, Director of City Development. Joining the council staff tonight are also members from our IT team and our governance team to support tonight's proceedings. So we thank you for participating in tonight's meeting, and I'll hand back to you, Mayor.
Thank you. I'll start with apologies, and I note that there are none this evening. I also note there is no leave of absence. Confirmation of the minutes of the ordinary meeting of Council held on the 16th of September, the special meeting of Council the 15th of October, and the special meeting held on the 18th of November 2024. Can I please have a councillor move? Oh, yeah. Moved Councillor Grotti, seconded Councillor Champion. I put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? The motion is carried. Disclosures of interests. As required at any other meeting of Council, councillors must declare any conflict of interest at the start of the meeting and leave the meeting when the item is presented to Council. Councillors will be required to leave the meeting and return when the item has been resolved. At any point throughout the meeting, if any other councillor recognises that they have a general or material interest, they can flag that at that point and follow the same procedure. Are there any disclosures of interest? Councillor O'Kane will declare an interest. Councillor O'Kane, would you like to advise us on the item?
Thank you. Councillors, I would like to declare that I have a material conflict of interest at item 1.3. That's the specifics of my interest as I interpret the conflict of interest regime within the Local Government Act 2020 is that depending on Council's decision on that item tonight, I could stand to gain a benefit or suffer a loss as my property is in the vicinity of Olympic Park. And I believe that in my interest, my interest is indirect in that the amenity of my property could be impacted. I will be removing myself from the council decision tonight and have removed myself from council deliberations at the time I understood my conflict to have arisen.
Thank you, councillor. Are there any other disclosures? There are no other disclosures. Officers that are present, I now ask whether you have a conflict of interest in any items presented before council tonight. No. I note there is no urgent business and that there are no petitions this evening. Well, we'll move straight into 3.1, award of contract for the construction of Olympic Park Pavilion. Thank you, Councillor. O'Kane is removing herself as she's declared material interest. There are 3 speakers on this item. Linda Riberich will address Council in person and speak against the recommendation. Linda, if you are here. Thank you, Linda. Please approach the lectern. You will have 2 minutes to speak.
Thank you. Ready to go? Good evening. Thank you, Mayor, Councillors, CEO, and all here present to allow me to speak tonight. This is in regard to the commencement of the Olympic Park Pavilion, which, if passed, will start in just a week. Firstly, as a resident in close proximity of the pavilion, I feel like more discussion is needed with the neighbouring residents before the motion for tender is passed. I am really concerned that the noise from activities associated with the pavilion will have a negative impact on our lives as residents. In recent months, we have experienced a lot of extra noise already from activities of local sporting clubs when they play music or when matches and training is held. The pavilion will hugely increase activities such as meters away from our houses. The acoustic engineering report is released days ago. Even if we accept the night or noisy celebrations of matches. In conclusion, this tender is being pushed without significant acknowledgement of the concerns of residents in the proximity of Olympic Park, and again, no proper thought has been given to the well-being of the local residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Laurie Zion will address council in person and he's speaking against the recommendation. Thank you, Laurie. You have 2 minutes.
Thanks, and good evening, everyone, and thanks to the new council for providing me with the opportunity to speak this evening. I'm a resident in Liberty Parade, where I've lived since 2012. I'm speaking against the motion not because of any specific concerns about the merits of the preferred company, but because, as one of the many residents in the Olympia ward whose house backs onto the northern oval of the park, I feel the pavilion process has constantly run ahead of what I would regard as sufficient transparency with residents, and we've also had to endure what I consider to be flawed consultation processes. The fact that councillors are voting on this motion this evening is a case on point. In communication with the council last Thursday, I stressed the concerns about what I see as a lack of inclusion of residents in many aspects of this process, the outcome of which will be a very large facility for sport and community clubs with a liquor licence to midnight, 7 days a week, as we've already heard, less than 100 metres from local residences. As residents, as you've already heard, we've been subjected to enormous additional noise since the Ovals opened earlier this year. We can only imagine how much worse it will get with a new venue in close proximity. It was only at close of business on Thursday that we received details of the acoustic engineering report that was agreed would be established in July. When told on Monday last week, after early attempts to communicate with council officials, that this report would be sent by this time, I was not informed that the first motion of the first meeting of council would be to seek approval for the tender, nor that work on this site would start 1 week from now. Instead, I assumed there'd be time for residents to analyse the report ahead of any vote on the commencement of works and to engage with the new council, who I congratulate on their election. Meanwhile, the version of the master plan that's online is from 2017. It's the only one accessible at the moment, and it situates the pavilion in a place which I interpret as facing the south oval. Due to inadequate communication and consultation, I therefore request the council to be voting on item 3.1 tonight to provide an opportunity for council officers and councillors to sit down with us, the residents, and hear all our concerns relating to the proposed pavilion and Olympic Park, and to develop much better consultation processes for integrating resident voices into decision making. Thank you.
Thank you, Laurie. Our next is a written statement which will be read out on behalf of Edwina Entwistle by Mark Gilio, Director of Corporate Services. Edwina is against the recommendation.
The proposed location of the pavilion is far too close to residents. Not just sporting clubs, but community clubs will be using the pavilion at all hours. This will seriously impact residents' quiet enjoyment of their properties, especially after hours. Why haven't we, as residents, had a proper consultation about the location of the pavilion, which was not situated where it is planned to be built in master plans? We've been trying to get info for 5 months and then only received the acoustic engineering report 2 working days before the meeting. This acoustic assessment only addresses noise levels of sports on ovals during daylight hours. This is not residents' only concern regarding noise. The very late report does not address our concern of increasing noise impacts outside of actual matches on the oval. The issues we have raised about the potential high use of the club with an alcohol licence till midnight are certain to cause unreasonable disruptions to residents. Can the new council please press pause on this development until there's been time to work through the issues raised above? It really does seem only fair that residents be informed in a timely manner so they can offer an informed response. As it stands, our requests for information have not been forthcoming until an inadequate assessment in a final hour. These are our daily lives that will be seriously affected by the amenity not sought by the local community.
Our next speaker is Helen Tirikos on behalf of Heidelberg United Football Club, and she will address council in person, speaking for the recommendation. You have 2 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you for allowing me to speak. Thank you to the Banyule City Council for their vision and financial support of this project after a thorough consultation process with the community during the master plan process. The project has significantly transformed the entire precinct with investment in sporting, recreational and community facilities and infrastructure. It is making such a positive impact to the area by improving safety, amenities and opportunities to be active and have social connectedness. There has been an increased pride in the area which has transformed the membership of our own club, a development that was long overdue in the Olympia ward that is home to this historical sports facility. Our club, as a key sporting club partner and tenant, with 30 women's, girls, boys and men's teams, and with over 10,000 members and supporters, are very proud and excited about this final stage, the Sports Pavilion. An accessible, inclusive and welcoming sports pavilion complying with cricket and football standards that matches the high standard of the playing fields and amenities currently there will be fantastic for the area. We have been using the playing fields now for training and games since mid last year without access to a pavilion, with change rooms, toilets and a social room. This facility will ensure that our players can safely access a toilet without having to walk through a car park late at night. There used to be a pavilion there. It would also provide a place for our parents of junior players to congregate and socialise rather than to do so in the car park, which is right next to the residence fences. We are looking forward to continuing to work with council and residents, maximising participant opportunities and contributing to the health and wellbeing of the community. In 2025, I want to say we will have 12 women and girls teams, 7 men and boys and 11 mixed mini-roos teams. This is the first time ever since our history of 1958 that our women and girls team exceed our men's. It's a testament to the facility. Thank you.
Thank you. Helen. Councillors, there's an officer's report before you as set out in the agenda papers. I'm now calling for a motion.
Through you, Mayor, I'd like to ask a question of the Director of Community Wellbeing.
Thank you. Councillor.
Thank you, Mayor. Certainly a new sports pavilion is always an anticipated event. However, given the questions raised tonight by a number of the speakers, I ask you, Director Tobacco, what scope is there to press pause on awarding this contract in order to raise or rather address resident concerns that have been raised tonight? What impact would it have if we were to delay awarding the contract tonight?
Through you, Mayor, thank you for the question, Councillor McKern. It's a question which I'll respond to in part, and perhaps my colleague Darren Bennett, as the Director of Assets and City Services, can provide some further context. There are some consequential impacts associated with Council's absence of endorsement of the recommendation tonight. So from an operational perspective, in terms of clubs, there is a sporting club which has been displaced. The local cricket club has been displaced now for what will be effectively 4 seasons as a result of the demolition of the Scary Pavilion, which this proposed pavilion seeks to replace. Secondarily, there are also some implications associated with feedback received from the community. So some of the feedback from the community related to the community usage of the Northern Oval. What we've tried to facilitate with the Heidelberg United Football Club is through this contract to install a netting, a separating netting device which will enable greater usage of the pitches in the middle of the pavilion, in the middle of the Olympic Park precinct. As a consequence of that, that reduces the number of times in which the club will need to use the North Oval, which therefore creates greater community access during hours which would otherwise be occupied by the sporting clubs. That's just one of the examples, but for some of the contractual obligations and financial implications, I may, through your permission, Mayor, hand over to Darren.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. In relation to not awarding this contract tonight, that may require the council to re-tender for the pavilion. That won't necessarily guarantee that we would get the same type of price that we have before you at the moment. There is also an existing funding agreement with the state government. Part of that funding agreement with the state government is some key milestone dates in terms of finalising the master plan. The finalisation of the pavilion element is required by February 2026, so that would require us to renegotiate that funding agreement with the state government.
Thank you, Director. Councillor Garotti.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Just want to follow up, if I may, on that response from Director of City Assets that council may have to re-tender. Just a question through you, but surely that would put the council in an enormously difficult position, and it's certainly not my understanding from previous tender recommendations coming to this chamber. There must always be an implicit understanding or appreciation that council will exercise its prerogative to defer or to seek further information. So I want to query that comment that we would have to re-tender, because to me that has governance and process issues beyond this particular item. Thank you, Mayor.
And through you, Mayor, the response was it may require, but we can delay the tender if the contractor is willing to hold the price. The contractor may not be willing to do that. In that case, if the contractor walks away, that might wait. A 6-month delay could potentially add cost to the delivery of the contract. Unsure about what that would be, but there would likely be some construction escalation estimates or negotiation that would be required with the preferred tenderer.
Councillor McKern.
Thank you, Mayor, through you, and thank you, Director Bennett, for your comments. I question whether a 6-month delay is required given the nature of the queries raised tonight. I don't think that the queries raise an enormous impost, and I am wondering whether there is capacity, Director Bennett, to award the tender on condition that further consultation be conducted with the community over the next month.
Through you, Mayor, that would be difficult for us to put in front of the contractor in relation to the further negotiations required, because that may result in some changes to the detailed design which the contractor has tendered on. So it would be difficult for them to be able to hold that price with not knowing what potential changes may come through that consultation process.
Councillor Castaldo.
Through you, Mayor, I'd like to ask the question of the relevant officer regarding what consultation has been done with the community and what has been amended as a consequence of community consultation and feedback.
Through you, Mayor, thank you for the question, Councillor Castaldo. There has been quite comprehensive consultation that has occurred since the development of the master plan back in 2017. Granted that obviously the COVID period provided an element of pause in which we perhaps weren't in touch with the community, perhaps to a standard which would be considered acceptable or helpful in this particular context, and that has been some of the feedback we have received. In more recent times, there have been several meetings which have been held between the Chief Executive, myself and senior officers, meeting with members of the community to hear the feedback on a whole range of matters. So some of the summary of the feedback and concern received includes, as I referenced before, the use of the community pitches by clubs and the needs of residents for shared access, the schedule of use and times, the pavilion location and the perception that it may have changed from the original plans, the potential adverse impacts on amenity of residents, including noise and how to protect residents, perceived lack of resident consultation on the pavilion, a lack of understanding about the stages, funding and purpose of the pavilion, and a range of relationships and dynamics that have played out between the club and also local residents. So all of that feedback, as well as detailed feedback about the design of the building, have all been taken on board. Specific design changes were implemented in the final detailed designs, which are being considered this evening, including double glazing throughout the facility to attenuate any noise within the facility, additional measures taken in terms of insulation for the building as well at a higher grade than we would ordinarily undertake. The development and the circulation of an acoustic report, which is something that council would not ordinarily undertake in the development of a new sporting facility, and a whole range of other measures in terms of including meetings between the club and interested residents in order to provide a stronger level of communication flow between those two parties.
Thank you, Director.
One further question, Mayor?
Yes.
If I may. You also provided some information to councillors just around the distance of the pavilion to the community homes. Could you provide how it relates to how far it is relative to other pavilions that we've got throughout Banyule?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. So council manages relationships with around about 80 sporting clubs across 30 different facilities across the municipality. The distance between pavilions and residential properties range from 3 metres to, in this particular case, in excess of 50 metres. So the positioning of the facility, depending on which end of the building it's being measured from, it's between 50 and 60 metres. So it is significantly greater than what we have in other parts of the municipality.
Councillor Curry.
Thanks, Mayor. Through the relevant director, one of the concerns raised by one of the speakers was about the social activities that might occur at that site outside of the sporting grounds. At what discretion does council have to make limitations on the hours of operation or limit what uses that pavilion will have?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. Thanks for the question, Councillor Curry. So to answer the question, Council's Sporting User Guide provides a framework for which we then enter into agreements with different sporting clubs for the use of all pavilions. And it's a homogenous set of guidelines which apply unilaterally across all of our sporting pavilions. That particular guide is currently in operation and is set to conclude in 2026, and so that provides an opportunity for council to review its current processes and practices in relation to pavilions. In terms of hours of use, the current hours of operation for all sporting pavilions is Monday to Thursday from 4 p.m. to 10 p.m, Friday from 4 p.m. to 12 a.m, Saturday from 8 a.m. to 12 a.m, and Sunday from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m.
Councillor Grotti.
Thank you, Director, for confirming those times. Some residents indicated to me that activities were occurring on weekends from as early as 7 a.m. How does that happen if the requirements are 8 a.m. onward?
Through you, Mayor, Councillor Grotti, I'd need to take that on notice. I'm not aware of that particular situation, but that is something that we would take up with the club directly. This is often the case with different sporting clubs around the municipality where we receive complaints or notifications around operations outside of hours. We communicate with the club immediately in those situations.
Councillors, there's an officer report before you set out in the agenda papers. I'm now calling for a motion. Moved Councillor Champion. Is there a seconder? Seconded Councillor Wood. There's an amendment. Point 4, Councillor Champion may indicate that she will move. Do you mind reading that out, Councillor Champion?
I can do that. 1 as is, 2 as is, 3 as is. Point number 4, note for purposes of clarification, the Olympic Park Master Plan has been shared with the community since 2017. However, the detailed designs of the proposed pavilion have only been available to the community since July 2024. So moved.
Thank you, Councillor. Does the seconder still second that? Yes.
Through you, Mayor, I would like to foreshadow an additional motion. Should the mover be acceptable to that, happy to state what that might be. Well, I'd like to actually add it to this.
Councillor may wish to add this What are the words, Councillor?
The words are, Mayor, to award the tender on condition that further consultation be conducted with the community to reach a more acceptable outcome, and that awarding of the contract be returned to Council in the first meeting of Council in 2025.
Does the mover agree to this addition?
Based on the significant amount of information that has been given to us by the officers, I would have to say no.
Okay. We will continue to go forward with the motion with point 4. Councillor Champion, do you wish to speak?
I don't. Thank you very much, Mayor, for asking though.
Does the seconder wish to speak?
Through you, Mayor. So the question put towards the council is award of the contract for the construction of the pavilion. To that end, I'm satisfied with the commercial due diligence by officers with regard to the tender award. However, I recognise the issues that have been raised tonight and before tonight. I'm also satisfied with the work done by officers to consider feedback, as been outlined by Director Tobacco this evening. They've made changes and amendments based on that feedback that I think are satisfactory. I'm certainly sympathetic to the neighbouring residents, particularly those quite close to the pavilion. However, in my view, the proportionate intergenerational value for community to promote health and well-being through sport and participation is too great. Recognising that this is stage 4 of an excellent development, it's a really positive improvement in the space, and I'll be supporting the movement tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wood. Councillor McKern.
Thank you, Mayor. We all know that a new pavilion is an exciting thing. It takes a long time to raise the funds. Here we're looking at a $5.6 million budget. I believe $2 million of which is being put up by the state government, and council is funding to the tune of 3.5. Now, one of the considerations I think that is important, and I don't believe it's been adequately addressed given what I've heard tonight from our speakers, is that residents in the area should also be excited about a new pavilion. They should have some level of access. It is, after all, a public asset. It's not a private asset where ownership is largely that of 1 or 2 clubs. And that should be made clear. I didn't sense from the speakers tonight that there's a great sense of community ownership. I hope that that changes with the new pavilion going forward. It's the residents in the area that have to live with this outcome day in, day out. If they're already raising concerns around usage times that aren't being properly respected, that's of concern to me. It would have been good to be able to get my foreshadowed motion up and to enable more consultation. If for no other reason, for our speakers to feel that they are heard. And tonight I didn't get that sense. So I do feel for you tonight. I will not be supporting this motion because I agree with you that you have not been adequately heard, and it's our job to listen to you.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Curry.
Thanks, Mayor. I had a number of conversations with residents of the area. I spent an hour on Friday rigorously holding the council officers to task. I covered a number of topics regarding the acoustics, the community uses, the additional use by sporting clubs, the hours of operation. I asked all the questions that I would ask if the sports ground was next to my place. But as a new councillor on board, I have to be aware that we have had a process over the last 4 years and since 2017, and we are in stage 4. And if I'm prepared to put the process on hold to then recreate the wheel on that consultation. But I completely understand that residents feel that we could have done more here. I'm sure there is more in the space. But because there's an operational management going forward on this site and we are in line with other sporting grounds, I would be prepared to support this rather than risk the tender that's on the table at the moment. But I am open to further conversations with residents on how they're impacted, and that might potentially be things of how we operate the site and what doors are open, and whether we can minimise those sound impacts. And I hope that the sporting groups would be on board with perhaps having us come down as councillors and residents that will allow us to make some suggestions on that operation model. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Castaldo.
Yeah, today you might be confused about what we're receiving tonight, but today we're receiving an item to award a contract which has come in within budget and delivers a significant improvement to the sporting community of Banyule. That's good news when inflation is continuing to drive up costs and we're looking to provide increased access to sports participation. But I also acknowledge the significant variation to the public park and sports fields of the Olympic Park area. This is hard for locals not asking for these facilities. But on this occasion, the level of consultation and variation to the master plan over the process, and we heard some of those variations earlier, but not all of them, like the overflow car parks that were cancelled. There's a range of other changes that were made throughout the process. After hearing all of that, having meetings with officers prior to this, I believe we've done our due diligence and it's time to move forward. I believe we've taken on the feedback appropriately and consulted appropriately. Our job can't satisfy everyone, and this is one of those situations where we're going to have two differing views. It's very difficult. So tonight, having said that, I will be supporting this contract awarding this evening.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Garotti.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Just on a point of process and governance, it concerned me a little bit, the officer comment earlier around council not being in a position to ever be able to defer tenders, even for one meeting. That puts the council in a very difficult position and potentially undermines our position in the commercial marketplace. So I'll personally be doing a little bit of work around that and liaising with the CEO. So that's just raised a concern with me that transparently I have to disclose to the public tonight. In terms of the substance of what's before us, and given that comment that was made, I'm really not in a position to do anything other than to support the recommendation. But I certainly do hear the concerns of residents. And in fact, I've had those concerns myself from a long time, going back to when I was mayor and opened the facility. I'm concerned that this is the single biggest investment the council has ever made in sport and recreation facilities in the history of the council. And I wonder where the return or benefit is to the local community. I wonder around how they're being brought along the journey, engaged, consulted, supported. I wonder around how people in Heidelberg West in particular are gaining a benefit out of this facility. I've raised with officers a desire to see the MOU between the club and the community. I'm still waiting on that, but I'm here to tell the community I'm like a dog with a bone on that. I'm not going to give up until I see that MOU. So very reluctantly, I will support this motion tonight, and I'm happy to have further conversations with the residents around how I and other councillors can be of support to you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Garotti. I'd like to say that the governance principles around the usage of this will be strong, and I'd like to think going forward based on relationships and trust. I now put the motion to a vote. All those in favour? Against? The motion is carried. Just wait for Councillor O'Kane to return to the chamber. We'll resume. 3.2, Quarterly Financial Management Report. There are no speakers on this item. There's an officer report before you, councillors, set out in the papers. I'm now calling for a motion. Do I have a mover? Moved, Councillor Wood. Do I have a seconder? Seconded, Councillor Di Pasquale. Councillor Wood, do you wish to speak?
Mayor, if possible, is it appropriate, could I ask a question of the appropriate officer with regards to the recommendation this evening? Through you, Mayor, just a question of the appropriate officer. We see here this evening and through the report that we do have an underlying deficit that we are wanting to address over the next few years. How are the operating surpluses going to fix that problem, I suppose, looking forward? Thank you.
Director Gilio, can you respond?
I can, and through you, Mayor. Thanks for the question, Councillor Di Pasquale. We have budgeted for an underlying operating deficit for this year of, as we have over the last couple of years. Probably one of the things that we're doing to address that is looking at a number of things within the organisation, particularly at our revenue streams. As councillors may know, most of our revenue is generated from rates, or around about 60%, but we also have other forms of revenue that we're looking at, excuse me, to explore to increase, particularly around fees and charges, and to maximise the amount of grants that we get from other levels of government. On the expenditure side, also looking at inbuilt deficiencies through our discretionary costs and minimising the amount of spend on certain areas within the organisation. But what we're looking at is a number of efficiencies across the services to address that underlying deficit. It is pleasing to note we do have an operating surplus each year, but to address the underlying operating deficit, both a combination of looking at maximising our revenue streams and looking at alternative revenue streams, and also looking at building in more efficiencies on our cost base as well.
So just to confirm, Councillor Wood moved the motion. Yep, seconded, Councillor Di Pasquale. Do you wish to speak? Does the seconder wish to speak? Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, very important that we are working on the budget, how we are spending the rate dollar, the income, etc. More so now, I believe, than in the past. I think the reason for my question tonight, Mayor, was because we came out of a time period over the last few years where interest rates were much lower than what they are now. And the pressures on a homeowner, a mum, dad, family with a mortgage were less than what they are now. So, and there's no real indication that interest rates are going to come down. I mean, the Reserve Bank are continuing to keep them up for some reason that I don't really know, but I ask people, where should the interest rates be? And most people say they should be coming down, but they're just not. So we need to be really wary as councillors what our rate dollar is doing and what impost we're putting on our rate payers. Specifically in that if we are going to run a deficit this next financial year and forecasting into the next 3 years, I believe, we need to be accountable to the community for that. And we need to be discussing what we are doing to bring that down, if not eliminate that. I think we deserve that. I think the community deserves that. We've been elected here to try and come up with ideas under the guidance of our officers who are very good and capable at their job. And I think we will do it. I think we will have discussions. We will turn this around. And if we can do it quicker rather than later, I think it'll put our community in a better position when those interest rates do come down in the next few years, I'm hoping. It'll put us in an even more stronger financial position and help ratepayers out there even more so, not only now but into the future as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Does any other councillor wish to speak? I put the motion to a vote. All those in favour? The motion is carried. Item 3.3, 1 Stradbroke Avenue, notice of intent to sell. As submissions have already been heard, there are no speakers on this item. There's an officer report before you, councillors, set out in the papers. I am seeking a mover. Moved, Councillor Castaldo. Do I have a seconder? Seconded, Councillor Garotti. Councillor Castaldo, do you wish to speak?
Just that this is a procedural type motion coming before us, just to accept people's feedback on the consultation on the notice to sell.
Does a seconder wish to speak? Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Curry?
Thanks, Mayor. Yes, although this is a procedural motion, we are talking the intent to sell land and this 1 Stradbroke Avenue, and just to confirm that I will be looking at this process as it comes back to council. We're not just ticking the box here. This is just a technical requirement that we have to accept submission, so we will go through the rigorous testing of the resolution when it comes back to council. Thanks.
Thank you, councillor. Does any other councillor wish to speak? I put the motion to a vote. All those in favour? The motion is carried. Item 3.4, Audit and Risk Committee unconfirmed minutes. There are no speakers on this item, and there's an officer report set out in the agenda papers with a slight amendment. Do I have a mover with the slight amendment? Councillor Garotti, would you like to take us through that, please?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Just an amendment to point number 1, that at the end of that officer recommendation, with an amendment to the attendance record in the body of the officer report to reflect that C.R. Garotti was in attendance at that meeting. The rest as is.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Seconded, Councillor Champion. Councillor Garotti, do you wish to speak?
Just to acknowledge that, the officer report noted myself as being absent, but I certainly did attend that meeting. It was a very important one because the annual accounts were considered by the committee and recommended to this council for approval. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, councillor. Does the seconder wish to speak? Any other councillor wish to speak? Put the motion to a vote. All those in favour? The motion is carried. Item 3.5, record of councillor meetings. There are no speakers on this item, and there's an officer report. I'm now calling for a motion. Moved, Councillor Castaldo. Seconded, Councillor Champion. Does the mover wish to speak? Does the seconder wish to speak? Does any other councillor wish to speak? I'll put the motion. All those in favour? The motion is carried. Item 3.6, award of contract for cyclic tree pruning. There are no speakers on this item, and there's an officer report in the agenda papers. With an amendment, Councillor McKern, could you please take us through?
Sorry, I think it might be the next one, Councillor.
We were going to refer it to the AC review.
Request for, yep.
Okay, so yes, if we could go back to the motions put up. This is a motion that was put up by Councillor Garotti. The amendment is point 3, request for officers to present analysis and costings of in-house service provision to the council prior to any future decision to extend the contract.
Do I have a seconder? Seconded, Councillor Garotti. Councillor McKern.
Thank you very much, Mayor. I think probably my colleague, Councillor Garotti, will speak to point 3, given that he's put that up. This report addresses tree pruning for our street trees with respect to awarding a contract to an external operator. What's changed here, what's different, is that we're looking at a contract with more frequent inspections. Rather than a 2-year cyclic pruning regime, a 12-monthly cyclic pruning regime. And this is actually potentially a very good thing because it should encourage earlier corrective pruning and earlier detection of tree problems. given that this is a lump sum contract instead of a unit-based model, we do need to ensure that council will be receiving value for money. And I think it speaks to point 3 that Councillor Garotti has raised. In all our contracts, particularly if we're looking at in-house versus external providers, we need to ensure that we are getting value for money. And I think Councillor Di Pasquale also spoke to that, particularly in a cost of living crisis where every cent matters. Tree matters are indeed very important to our community. All matters relating to trees that come before this council attract community comment and debate. And whilst there are no speakers this evening, believe me, we have, as a councillor group, received emails from our community questioning why the change in the cyclic nature of the contract. Council does manage more than 60,000 street trees, and they are one of the most important infrastructure assets that we have. So it's understandable that we're going to have this level of interest. To this end, and looking at the comments we've received, this has also piqued my interest in terms of a potential working group with external stakeholders and community members to guide the implementation of our relatively new urban forest strategy. We will be reviewing our advisory committees and population committees, and hopefully in that process look at the opportunity for a working party to guide what we're doing with our tree management through that urban forest strategy. So that's all I want to say, but otherwise I'm actually quite excited about this process, and I do like the caveat introduced by, potentially introduced, should we all accept this motion, by Councillor Garotti for the checks and balances. Thank you, Mayor.
Councillor Garotti.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, happy to be supporting this motion and a good tender outcome achieved. And certainly the full suite of information available to councillors gives us that assurance. I think as a matter of course, this council now is looking to our executive to always test the option of an in-house service provision against going to market. And typically, external providers will offer the benefit of efficiencies and in process and practice and system. The other thing is that sometimes they operate at lower EBA levels than what you find in the public sector within local government. The benefits of one thing that we have to be aware of, though, as a local government is that when we in-house, we don't pay payroll tax. With the Fair Work Commission as well, and same work, same pay, legislative requirements, one of the benefits that you might have historically found in outsourcing may not necessarily be there with respect to EBAs. So this is an area where I think the council, and in particular the executive, have to get serious and genuinely test the benefit of insourcing against an outsourcing arrangement, because certainly my experience in other industry sectors is indicating that there's enormous cost as well as quality benefit to insourcing. So very happy with this outcome for the next 3 years, but I think it would have been irresponsible for this council to have signed up for a further 3 years unchecked without having the market tested. And I think as well it'll help to hold the provider that we're engaged to account when it comes time to renewal. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor O'Kane.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. I'd just like to also reiterate what Councillor McKern said about the value of the trees and the value that our community's residents put on trees. I'm supporting the motion because I think an important point of this contract is that it's moving from a reactive to a proactive position for management of trees, which I think has many benefits. In particular, it's going to be less stress on trees when they are being pruned back. And I think that's an important thing for the health of the trees, but also I think it would reduce anxiety within or from residents who see trees that are severely pruned back and are concerned and raise concerns. So I think it'll just be a more gentle but also effective process. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Castaldo.
I'll just make it short, but this is an incredibly important contract and will require a level of internal performance reviewing, as the trees are in our public realm as one of the most important community assets we have and defines our city. So we're going to be having reviews across the performance, and that's really important because there was a number of situations across Branyul where pruning of trees was so significant it upset a lot of people, and we've got to make sure we do that right. Now, some of the information we've received as councillors isn't in the report, and it's unfortunate you didn't get the opportunity to see that, but this will increase the frequency of the cuts to an annual instead of 2 years, which requires less to be cut at each particular cycle. And so that will enable us to structure the trees to deliver a better canopy cover, better structure, and you won't get as many surprises when they do come down your street. So the information we've been provided gives me the confidence that we're taking the best course of action, and it doesn't increase costs as well.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, this is an extraordinarily complex project. Just recognising that it is packages 1 and 2 of the tree pruning contract, and at this stage it excludes park and reserve tree pruning, facilities and car parks, playground tree pruning, which is going to come before council at a later date, which might tie in with the motion from Councillor Garotti, and we might be able to link them together. Just recognising that those other 3 packages are estimated to be a spend of about $2 million per annum. I'll just look for confirmation on that from Director Bennett, if that's actually correct. $2 million per annum on the other 3 packages?
Yes, through you, Mayor, that's correct. But approximately $2 million.
Yep. So I just make the point that this is a big spend, and I echo the thoughts of Councillor Garotti, and we had some internal conversations about the challenges of bringing a service like this in-house, but it's certainly worth exploring with a spend like this. So I would be supporting that. Also, in reviewing this contract, we were privy to some commercial and confidence information with regards to this contract, and as a council group, we've aired our desire to have the officers manage this contract tightly to make sure that it's in the best interests of our community. That's all I had, so I'll be supporting this motion.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Curry.
Thanks, Mayor. Just very quickly, I just want to mention that this is not council handing over the control of the trees. Council is holding an auditing process on this contract. So although the contract for actually doing the work goes to this service provider, council will be doing its checks and balances to make sure very often that we are out there checking the work that's done and checking it's to the standard. And as you know, I'll be very keen to see how this project progresses. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Does any other councillor wish to speak? A lot of what I was going to say has been covered, so I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? The motion is carried. Item 3.7, Cemeteries Trust Operations Report. There is one speaker on this item. Melissa Murphy-Webster will address council in person and is speaking for the recommendation. Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you. I wasn't really sure whether I was going to speak on this. It's kind of a bit to the side, so bear with me. Over the last 3 years, we've seen an excess report of all-cause mortality in Australia, in some periods up to 27%. And we can see that even just by Banyul's own graph in the reports. Heart disease being the leading cause as per the ABS, with turbo cancers, diabetes and dementia contributing heavily. I don't believe there's enough focus on the pollution and the impacts of human health. The food that we eat is injected with antibodies. It's sprayed with chemicals, made with chemicals, or processed to such a degree that there's no nutritional value in them. How we cook our food using appliances that emit radiation or release PFOA toxins. Also, the method of cooking can also reduce the health metrics. The water that comes from our taps are so full of chemicals that more and more households are putting in filters to reduce consumption of neurotoxins and other heavy metals. However, safe water, safe clean water, is not a luxury everyone can afford, and even rainwater is being tested to have concerning levels of toxicities. The air is constantly being sprayed with rubbish, including silver iodide, that has been linked to numerous health risks, and parklands are sprayed with hazardous chemicals to deter weeds. Radiation from towers, devices,
Through you, Mayor,
held-on
point of order,
devices.
please.
What's your point of order, Councillor Wood?
Just the relevance to the topic.
Death. It's a cemetery report. It goes to death. It goes to cause of death. Can I continue? Radiation from towers, devices, held-on appliances, including EMFs, can have negative impacts on health which are not being relayed to residents. Recommendations to take a pill or jab are more prevalent than recommendations to eat well and exercise. My point is, it is evident that there's a definite crisis pertaining to health and morbidity. And if we have to be a thriving community, then Banyule Council should be an advocate to the community to help reduce these dangers, take an example from Port Hedland's concerns about their own excess mortality. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. Councillors, there's an officer report before you set out in the papers. I'm now calling for a motion.
Mayor, may I just ask a question to the appropriate officer?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Di Pasquale.
Thank you for our speaker this evening, very brave. And the relevance of, I think, if we can be made aware of what, I believe there's going to be a report and an evaluation being done early next year with regards to the health or, is that correct? Correct. Could we have some more information about that just quickly?
Director Tobacco.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. Thanks for the question, Councillor Di Pasquale. Yes, Council is in the process of, under legislation, being required to develop a new health and wellbeing plan. That plan is being developed in parallel with the Council plan, so there will be ample opportunity for the community to contribute their thoughts and ideas around the type of activities Council will be engaged in delivering over the next 4 years.
Thank you. Yep. We have a motion with an amendment. Do I have a mover? Moved, Councillor McKern.
Thank you, Mayor. And I'll just point out the amendment to the motion, and that is point 3, request that the Banyule Cemeteries Trust provide a report back to Council in the first quarter of 2025 regarding the opportunities available at Warringal Cemetery. Regarding, I probably would have said for instead of regarding, if we could make that amendment, activation of areas of non-burial grounds in the cemetery as park space.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Garotti. Councillor McKern.
Thank you very much, Mayor. And thank you to our speaker. I'd like to think that that point 3 in part speaks to some of the aspects of the speaker's comments. Warringal Cemetery is in an interesting place at this point in time. There's a revenue return on a cemetery that is closed for business other than plots that are already owned. There are parcels of open space that have been recently revealed to the councillor group that have not been used for burial purposes. Whilst I am advised that these are small areas, they have actually presented an opportunity. Should we actually use the remaining space for additional burials, and that could be a small number of burials, once buried, we cannot use it as open space? Or should we be considering the fact that in the Heidelberg Activity Centre, of which this is a part, we have, going forward, probably one of the most densest population growths for the city. So where is the additional open space to service the densification of the central Heidelberg area? I believe we should be taking into account every opportunity to secure what open space we have for future generations. And so point 3 speaks to the opportunity to explore our cemetery, reimagine our cemetery in a different way, whilst having the deepest respect for it as a burial ground, also looking at the opportunity for passive recreation provision. Has this been done elsewhere? Yes. As the world densifies, we are looking at how we can multifunction spaces everywhere. So we have cemeteries in Dandenong, in New South Wales, in Tasmania, that are now operating both as parks as well as sacred burial grounds. I'd like to think that the report coming back to Council will show some innovative ways where we can have both the sacredness of our burial spaces, but also provide provision to our growing population of Heidelberg for additional open space. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. The seconder, Councillor Grotti.
Thank you, Mayor. We were wondering which councillor was going to be the first to call a point of order. Congratulations, Councillor Wood, and your first meeting too. And I think it was with some basis, actually, to call that point of order. The Public Health and Wellbeing Plan, which Councillor Di Pasquale pointed out through questions, I think that's a very good opportunity to raise a lot of the issues that were flagged by the Speaker tonight. Very happy to support this motion, including point number 3, in terms of report coming back. But we do need to be conscious that we wear 2 hats, one as councillors and the others as trust members of the trust, and the trust is currently in surplus, but longer term there's a lot of financial pressure there, and we want to try and avoid or minimise the risk of the cemeteries drawing upon ratepayer funds to sustain them in the future. So if we're looking at things that involve a use of land within the cemetery other than for its main purpose, which also has a revenue generating aspect to it, we need to be really conscious of that as a council, because otherwise in the future, we're increasing the risk that the future ratepayers are going to have to subsidise the cemetery. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Di Pasquale.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, that's effectively the state of play that Councillor Grotti has outlined, that I don't think residents understand that legislation states that Banyule Council needs to look after these cemeteries, and if we can't keep it in the black, we then will have an impost on rates, which every community member doesn't really want. But also the community needs to, and the community probably recognise that these decisions weren't part of council meetings in the past. We used to have these meetings outside of the council meetings. So the general public weren't really aware that, we were, this is part of council business. So this is an example that we really do, look after on behalf of the community. The council looks after the very young birth, the children, all the way through to, elderly and also death as well. But I suppose councillors, we get thrown into the mix with regards to, when we're elected, we become a councillor, and then we also become a trust member of the cemeteries. So, there you go, councillors. Added bonus, I suppose. That's all, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Castaldo.
I must just say that the cemetery is a beautiful asset of the Griffin Ward, one of the many places you might be able to visit, hopefully before the end of your life. There is a lot to see there. There's a lot of opportunities always to make it open to the community to enjoy as well. And so I'm supportive of the amendment, but one of the important things is that the revenue stream to manage this asset is really important to keep going forward, and we don't want to quickly rush forward when we do have a surplus in an operating year. So I'm very mindful of the long-term management, sustainable management of the park, the protection of all the important graves and the history in there. So I'm keen to be very cautious to spend money on this one, but look at opportunities.
Thank you, councillors. Put the motion to a vote. All those in favour? The motion is carried. Item 3.8, Cemeteries Trust Financial Statement. There are no speakers on this item and there's an officer report set out in the papers. I'm now calling for a motion. Moved, Councillor Garotti. Seconded, Councillor Di Pasquale. Does the mover wish to speak? Does the seconder wish to speak?
No, I think it's all been said, Mayor.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? I'll put the motion. All those in favour? The motion is carried. Item 4.1, Advisory and Population Committee Report, July to September 2024. There are no speakers on this item. I'm seeking a mover as set out in the agenda papers. Moved, Councillor Champion. Seconded, Councillor McKern. Councillor Champion.
Thank you, Mayor. Just very, very briefly, this is just a report on from July to September 2024, the activities of the committees to the council. That is simply it. And I would actually like to just thank all our committee members for their contribution to our world here in Banyule, our place where we live and work. We have really appreciated your contribution to our lives and the lives of our community. So thank you very, very much for your time and your expertise, your knowledge. You've certainly educated us in some areas. So thank you all very, very much for your support and your contribution. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Does the seconder wish to speak?
Thank you, Mayor. I too wish to be thankful and grateful for all that's been done in the past with regards to our advisory and population committees. However, going forward, I think it's really important to analyse these committees, and currently you'd be interested to know that there is a review of the structure of our committees, as has been requested by the councillor group. And if you look at them, there's 8 advisory and population committees. One of the 8 speaks to 2 departments, covers off on all city developments, city services and assets. That's one very big chunk of council services falling into the advisory committee of the Banyule Environment and Climate Action Advisory Committee. Whereas 7 of the advisory committees fall within community wellbeing. That concerns me. As chair last term of BCAC, I feel that we were trying to cover too much ground, and I think we need to see some of those areas split up and dealt with separately. When I look at some of the really big ticket items that we addressed last term, planning and housing was definitely one of them, including neighbourhood character. And I would like, through this review, to see that we actually have an advisory committee dedicated to planning and housing. So thank you for that show of approval. So yes, exciting times ahead, and we look forward to a report from the officers suggesting how we might rejig our advisory committees to be more effective in terms of the input we receive from our external stakeholders and members, so that there is time to provide meaningful engagement and recommendations fed back through this chamber. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Does any other councillor wish to speak? I put the motion to a vote. All those in favour? The motion is carried. Item 4.2, adoption of the proposed fair access in sport policy and action plan. There are no speakers on this item, and there's an officer report in the agenda papers. Councillor Garotti.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Very happy to be recommending this for approval by the council. So it was a requirement of state government that council has this policy in place. and it's a requirement for us to be able to access any state government SRV funding. But I think what's pleasing to be able to advise is that we already had a comprehensive policy, procedures and arrangements in place that go well beyond the minimum requirements of the state policy. This formalises it, I think it's something for us to be proud of as a council, and just one aspect of how this policy goes beyond minimum state government policy is our big focus on disability inclusion in sport and in recreation. Very happy to commend this policy and send it to state government. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. I just didn't get the seconder in there before you jumped in straight in. Seconded, Councillor McKern. Thank you, Councillor Grotti, for that.
Well, I admire Councillor Grotti's enthusiasm.
You won't be speaking again.
To speak on this, on the
Councillor
item.
McKern.
Given that sports infrastructure constitutes a significant portion of Council's $270 million infrastructure portfolio, it is important that we do consider inclusivity. It's something we talk to every time we have a meeting: inclusivity, diversity, equity. And one of the things I'd like to mention here is female-friendly change rooms. I know that that's a topic of import to our community, and I wanted to speak in relation to this policy because it does speak to providing for gender diversity and providing for women and girls more opportunities for them with respect to sport. So female-friendly change rooms is something that this council has really taken a big lead on. And to date, 27 pavilions have been fitted with female-friendly change rooms, leaving 7 more to go. Seddon Reserve, which I know they've been champing at the bit, we should start construction next week. But for the benefit of our community, I want you to know that these are the reserves coming up. James Street, Olympic Park North, Shelley Reserve. In the case of Shelley Reserve, they've received a federal government grant of $3 million. Elder Street and Cyril Cummins, Yulong Reserve and Central Park. So really happy to be supporting this policy and looking forward to all our pavilions having female-friendly change rooms fitted. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Does any other councillor wish to speak? I'll put the motion. All those in favour? The motion is carried. Item 6.1, 93 to 95 Grimshaw Street, Greensborough mixed-use building. Luke Mooney and Daniel Galtieri from Planning and Property Partners will address council in person and are speaking for the recommendation. Luke and Daniel, please approach the lectern. Or Luke, or one, Daniel? Which one?
Luke.
Luke, thank you. You have 2 minutes.
Daniel is here. Luke Mooney from Planning and Property Partners. We're the town planning consultancy that was involved in the application. Daniel is the project architect. Thought it was important for him to be here tonight to answer or assist councillors and any questions they may have. But I'll primarily be talking unless there's questions for Daniel. In terms of the application that's here before council tonight, we're obviously very pleased to talk in support of the officer's recommendation to issue a planning permit. It's been an application that's been in the 12 months or more in the process. It has been a sort of community consultative process with council laws, which involved a pre-application meeting towards the end of 2023, and then there was sort of further ongoing consultations and meetings with officers during the resubmissions early this year. So we have welcomed the opportunity to work very collaboratively with the officers to arrive at a proposal which I think is compromised from where we started, and I think it's a good example of how we can work with the officers to achieve a positive outcome for the site. In terms of Greensborough, it obviously needs no introduction to councillors, I'm sure, but I think it's important just to reaffirm that the planning scheme does talk about it as the main shopping, business and entertainment centre serving the north-east region of metropolitan Melbourne. And it is the area where there's a significant focus for intensification of retail and also residential uses are encouraged, which is what we say the application does. The site we're looking at today is a site that's centrally located within the activity centre, where there's the ability to absorb the heights that are proposed. It's not one of these transitioning precincts where, for example, we might be dealing with sensitive residential interfaces. It is a site that's really limited sensitivities and centrally located, and I think the proposal responds to that. It's a proposal that's essentially a principally 5-storey street edge, which then steps back and recedes across the site to address the level differences. And that was something that we worked significantly with council officers with, which include urban design input, which inform the ultimate building envelope that we have today. It's a proposal that's got ESD excellence. It goes above and beyond. It's not one where we're sort of scraping to meet minimum requirements. It is a 70% best, which is considered excellence for the ESD credentials of the building. And it does include diversity in terms of dwellings, in terms of 2 and 3 bedroom dwellings, as well as a very functional, flexible retail space as well. Welcome to take any questions that councillors may have.
Thank you, Luke. Councillor McKern may have a question.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Mr Mooney. I agree, you've put a lot of thought into the plans and we appreciate that. Given that we are in a cost of living crisis and there's been much talk around provision of 800,000 new homes across Victoria over the next 10 years, what thought have you given to provision of affordable housing within the proposed 24 apartment development?
I would say, just through you, Mayor, a minor correction, there's 21 apartments. So it's a development that's not of a significant scale in terms of simply apartment numbers. There are provisions in Banyule Planning Scheme to go down a different avenue with more significant development, with opportunities for affordable housing to be incorporated into that. But I suppose this is relatively boutique development in terms of it's not, we've got 21 apartments, it's not a significant number, and I suppose at this scale, there's limited scope to incorporate affordable housing compared to some other developments that might be 50, 60, 70, 80, 100 plus apartments, where there's more scope to incorporate and review those sort of affordable housing provisions and take a different planning pathway in terms of facilitating those approvals as well.
Thank you. Jai Sanford will address council in person and he's speaking for the recommendation. Thank you, Jai. You have 2 minutes.
Thanks, councillors. So I think, just in general, obviously making already great use of existing infrastructure and decreasing urban sprawl, having an apartment right next to train stations and supermarkets is a great idea. Obviously having fewer car park spaces increases the ability to promote alternatives like biking or public transport with Greenborough Station right next door. And having the greenery and communal spaces are also a really great way of increasing quality of life. But I think something that's really important for council to try and push for and advocate more for is even in small developments like this, I think it's really important for council to push for more affordable or community housing. I understand public's state-based, but community or affordable housing, even in smaller developments like this. And I guess a question, if someone would like to pass it on, would be, is there a way to forcibly make that happen through a planning level? Thanks.
Thank you, Jai. You may have a question.
I've just got a question for the relevant officer.
Yep.
At what point do affordable housing or housing is part of the planning scheme whenever a development comes forward?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Castaldo, and through you, Mayor. Affordable housing is something that is required to be discussed upfront with any application. So Council's recently adopted its housing enabled character strategies, and as part of the implementation of those strategies, we'll be looking to amending our planning scheme to include more policy on that front. Currently, under the Planning Environment Act, without the prior agreement of the planning applicant, council's not in a position to be able to impose a requirement for affordable housing. But where that agreement is in place, when an application is received, we're then able to ensure that affordable housing is provided and protected through tools like a Section 173 agreement that protects that affordable housing indefinitely or for an extended period of time.
One follow-up. So a development of this scale in the future, when we adopt the strategy, may lead to the requirement?
It's certainly, it's certainly theoretically possible. I am cognizant that the provision of affordable housing is normally done with an affordable housing partner. So it is a highly regulated space. They need to manage the affordable housing units to make sure that they are provided at a discounted rental in accordance with people's income status. So it's not as simple as constructing a unit and nominating it as such. You have to have a management regime. There's absolutely no barrier to an affordable housing association, however, picking up units in developments across that, but it's really probably one that is driven in part by the affordable housing market managers themselves.
Councillors, as an officer report set out in the papers, I'm now calling for a motion. Councillor
Mayor, yes,
Di Pasquale.
move as in the papers. Thank you.
Seconded, Councillor Garotti. Councillor Di Pasquale.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the speakers this evening, and thank you for the comments. In an application like this, we need to first accept whether this is an appropriate development for the location that it is in. Effectively, we're looking at one of the major activity centres of Banyule. So we have 3 major activity centres, 1 being Greensborough, 2 being Ivanhoe, and 3 being Heidelberg, which have major activity centre classification, and we've done extensive work over the years to delineate what that means, you know, where the borders are, how that needs to interface with residents, how developments should be encouraged in the area. So the reason why we have these activity centres is that it's an area where properties can be developed more than we would normally expect. So therefore, if we have these activity centres and we can develop them more, well, then we can say to the community and developers, leave our suburbs alone. Leave the the quiet streets, the house on the 600 to 800 square metre block, leave that alone. Don't cut those up. There's more than enough space that we can achieve the housing numbers that we need to achieve over the next 10 to 15 years and protect our community as well. So that's why Banyule Council has done such an extensive job and spent so much resource on the activity centre areas. Now, we then need to then establish, is this an appropriate development that is being proposed? Because if we have things like very small apartments, or not enough car parking, or people aren't going to want to live in these apartments, etc., that's going to be a problem. But they are very appropriate apartments. They're of good size. The applicant has gone to and fro with the officers, and the officers have asked the applicant to do many, many things, change many things, and they've been willing to do that. There's a mix of 2 and 3 bedrooms. There is appropriate car parking, appropriate close proximity to transport, infrastructure or major infrastructure that the Banyule community benefit from there in Greensborough. So therefore, one of the pieces of the puzzle is it a net benefit for the community to have such a development in the activity centre of Greensborough? I look at it as yes, but I also look at it that there are many applications that have been granted by this council but still haven't been built. So there are many out there that still haven't come up out of the ground. This may be another situation of one of those. I'm not sure. I hope it's not, because now that sorry, Mayor, I'll just sum up very quickly. now that the major road infrastructure, transport infrastructure is coming in, Greensborough is going to be a very big pressure point with regards to housing and cost there as well. So there's going to be a lot of developers willing to move in or wanting to move in. So when that happens, the officers need to push back with developers who don't want to work with the planning scheme, but also encourage the development for the years to come to give our Greensborough residents or people who want to live in Greensborough in such activity centres, locations or options where they can live. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Does the seconder wish to speak?
Yeah, just wanting to pick up though and looking to guidance from officers, but was there as a small amendment that we needed to pick up? No. Next one, sorry. Thank you. So very happy then to support the recommendation. And yeah, look, it's a challenging environment as we know economically, and to make these viable. And although there might not be affordable housing per se in it, any development that introduces 21 new dwellings to the community, that's going to contribute to affordability. So very happy to support this and wish them well. We need more of this development in our community to tackle the housing crisis that we're in. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor McKern.
Thank you, and thank you to the speakers, especially for raising the need for provision of affordable housing. We need to keep that alive on the agenda, so thank you. This application is coming to Council because it exceeds the preferred maximum height for the Greensborough Activity Centre, which is 18.5 metres. This exceeds it by 4.4 metres. So should we support it? I have studied the area, I've studied the plans and the report. And whilst the maximum height is exceeded, I appreciate that the two most upper levels that do exceed that height are recessed and provide for a level of community use. So I don't think they're going to make a considerable visual impact on the area. As a trade-off though, I think we get a lot of good stuff. And the good stuff is that, in my opinion, it actually constitutes good design. And this is what we need to see a lot more in Banyule. It has a fantastically articulated frontage. It allows for planting, deep soil planting in the communal level in the roof space where trees can be planted. It has excellent ESD features, and as the speaker pointed out, 70% best score is an excellent result. So we're going to see all electric fittings, we're going to see EV charging points, we're going to see bicycle parking. Congratulations to the staff for guiding this in this direction, but I do caution, exceeding building heights can set a precedent. And if we're going to exceed these preferred maximums, they better be damn good designs, because we're not going to approve them if they're not. So I do look forward to the amendment to the planning scheme to impose a requirement for affordable housing, but otherwise I do look forward to this, the first residential or rather mixed-use development for this area. Very exciting, and congratulations.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Castaldo.
Yeah, I think you've jumped a few hoops. You've got the support of officers, you've got the support of the local councillor, and it's looking positive as well. Look, I think you've done a good job in coming to council with a good design. This is an activity centre where a lot of people just drive into. There's not a lot of life at certain times of the day, and I think it will go a long way to helping move our area, this activity centre, forward. And I'm thanking you for bringing this type of density in, because I think it's much needed. We've got this in Heidelberg and it brings a life throughout the day. So having local people right in the centre of it, next to the station, with all those retail opportunities and everything else, they don't need to get in a car and drive somewhere. So this is good for public transport reduction pressures as well. So I'm not going to get in the way. It's got great environmental standards, but I'm always trying to push it forward. I looked keenly at the electric vehicle charging and also the bicycle parking. Having 8 bike parks for 21 units, for me, isn't the best outcome when it comes to green transport. We need more bikes, and I I know in my family we've got 6. So if we're serious on green transport, we're going to need to find spaces for bike parking. If there's opportunities to find additional spaces or put those bits of infrastructure in that makes it easier for people to put them in, please do so. And with the EV charging, it's a new world with that. I've got one, and I know how fantastic it is. And I wouldn't want the building not to enable variations or changes and it to be too costly for everyone in that building to have an electric vehicle one day. So if there's opportunity to go further with that, I really welcome that, and so please continue to explore that. But I'm very happy to support this tonight as well.
Thank you, Councillor. Does any other councillor? Yeah, Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll just reiterate a few points that I've heard already. And congratulations, Luke and Daniel. It really is a good development in the right place. It's assisting the housing strategy that the state government are pushing for in a high activity centre, so well done. And also, Jai, good point, well made. Congratulations. I concur with everything I've heard there, but just to go a little bit further, the 70% on the ESD, that's great, but it did occur to me that the 2 EV spots, the 8 bikes, no talk of battery stacks or anything like that. I suppose a rhetorical question for those in the room is why aren't these developments pushing to be off the grid in a bigger capacity? So I will look forward to seeing how that plays out in the future, but I just think we could do a little bit better than that. That's all. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Does any other councillor wish to speak? I too am impressed with the compromises made that do provide benefit to the community. So look forward to this quality development. I put the motion to a vote. All those in favour? The motion is carried. Item 6.2, 8 to 12 Bin Street, Montmorency. Proposed private drug and alcohol rehabilitation centre. There are 4 speakers on this item. Melissa Murphy-Webster will address council in person and is speaking for the recommendation. Thank you. Melissa, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm for this proposal. Drug and alcohol addiction can have a huge impact on the individual, their loved ones, as well as the greater community. In this case, there seems to be some misunderstanding in regards to what the place was going to be represented, and it looks like Banyule officers have addressed that in the report, which is that there was a concern it was going to be a now I can't think of what it is, but you know what I'm talking about. Injection room, yes. So my understanding and what I read in the report, that there's no more than 4 private patients at a time. And these are people who are voluntarily wishing to address their issues to get well, and they're assessed for a short stay residential rehab treatment. As I said, it's not an injecting room facility. The residents, patient clients are looked after by qualified staff and engaged in positive recovery programs to help build their personal resilience against their addiction issues. Whilst in the managed care, there will be very little interaction between residential clients and general community, other than short outings for exercise or external services such as holistic, that's my understanding, I beg your pardon, I shouldn't say that as fact, as holistic services of which they will be accompanied by staff. Banyule already have a number of rehab services in the municipality, which is the Odyssey House and Uniting Vic. These are public services and not private, and have long waiting lists for them. I've heard from many people in the community who, due to the stigma of addiction, wish to remain anonymous, and they tell me that they agree that there should be more access to services such as this. This is to enable those who do want to address the issues, and we believe it's a very needed service and much welcome. So, thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. Dean Grieger, hope I pronounced that correctly, CEO from Rehab Delta, will address council in person and is speaking for the recommendation. Thank you, Dean. You have 2 minutes.
To speak. We're offering a compassionate, evidence-based solutions and individualised programs to people that could be your neighbours, your colleagues, your families or your friends. This is a service which is in short supply within this area. Government-run operations usually have waiting lists or long waiting lists, some ranging from 6 to 12 months, and some even closing their books to new clients for a while. Alcohol alone is involved in over 30% of family violence and intimate partner violence. And furthermore, the use of non-therapeutic levels of pharmaceutical drugs is also a serious issue at the moment. We don't simply cover their addictive behaviours, but also consider past traumas, personality traits, and a variety of factors that have contributed to the choices they have made. These types of rehabs do not devalue properties or negatively impose on the neighbourhood, and that's all supported by data. This is a quiet operation that largely flies under the radar as far as the local community are concerned. These facilities do not attract crime or drug use to the area. Clients with us are clean, drug tested daily, and are supervised on extracurricular activities, ensuring neighbouring residents and their children are safe. Imposing on traffic is a non-issue. Clients are either picked up for residential care or dropped off by next of kin, and there are no visitors to protect the client's privacy and confidentiality. People who have been released from addictive behaviours mostly go on to great things, giving back to the community threefold, sometimes more. Proving this type of life-saving endeavour is not only worthwhile, but crucial, not only for the client and connected loved ones, but also for the community. We really want to make a real difference and appreciate any support.
Thank you, Dean. Councillor Di Pasquale.
Mayor, may I ask a question of the Speaker?
Sorry, Dean.
Through you, Mayor.
You have a question.
Mayor, just to get an indication for the community, what is the ratio or the percentage of those who may be in a facility like this due to alcohol compared to drug use? Are there any other, and also is there any other addictions that are taken care of, maybe like gambling or anything like that?
Yeah, gambling is a rarity, but we do open our doors to gambling as well. But in my experience, it's a rarity. And as far as alcohol use goes, that's the major concern. Over 75% of the clients I've seen in my lifetime have been alcohol addicted, and the rest mostly illicit drugs.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We have another question for you, Dean.
Sure.
Councillor Wood.
Through you, Mayor. Dean, or perhaps the relevant officer, we heard about the public services that we've got. What about the private services in Banyule? Do we know how many we've got in Banyule?
I think that an officer can answer. Thank you, Dean.
Through you, Mayor, I might need to take that question on notice. I don't have the specific number of private facilities in the municipality.
And through you, Mayor, just a follow-up question to that would be, what's the council's strategy in this space going forward? Thank you.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. Similar to the response that was provided earlier this evening to Councillor Di Pasquale, the development of Council's health and wellbeing plan, which is a legislated requirement, will detail where Council will allocate and focus its resources over the next 4 years. There's a great deal of work that we do with our partner agencies in this particular space. There is also some research which is conducted by officers, and that information will be shared with councillors and the community through the consultation process.
Councillor Garotti.
So to follow up on that question, is a service of this nature aligned to council strategies and plans around health and wellbeing? Through you, Mayor.
Through you, Mayor, thank you for the question, Councillor Garotti. The short response would be yes.
Okay, thank you. A written statement will now be read on behalf of Kirsten Hildebrand by Joseph Tobacco, Director of Community Wellbeing. Kirsten is for the recommendation.
Thank you, Mayor. The statement reads, this written statement is submitted on behalf of a close friend who I assisted to write the below. I support the proposal for the Montmorency Rehab Centre in Binns Street to operate and believe it is crucial for community members to have access to this support system. My adult family member and myself resided in Banyule for more than 20 years and recently moved to a nearby municipality in the northeast. This family member has a mild intellectual disability and has a prescription drug dependency. He understands his addiction and is trying to access support, but it has been extremely difficult. I wish to highlight my family member is an NDIS recipient, but the NDIS will not cover drug or alcohol addiction therapy. However, even if they did, support services are almost non-existent. After many years, the physical healing and the pain has now ceased, but the bad news is he has developed a painkiller/prescription drug dependency. The extremely sad news is there is barely any support in the prescription medication addictions area. Having access to an in-house rehab clinic locally would have been a preferred option. We seem to have so many clinicians involved and lots of toing and froing. This is not the best practice, as what is required is expert help to support. I feel helpless as a main carer and feel as if I have let him down. My family member wants to come off the meds and has articulated very clearly how the cravings are still there and is struggling. If you walk past my family member, you would have no idea of his struggle. He dresses decently, eats healthily, and certainly is not involved with crime or illegal behaviour. I know from being in and out of the hospital system with them that prescription drug addiction is very real, and I know my family member would not be the only person struggling with this. Please consider approving the rehab centre to be operational in Montmorency so families like myself and many others can access quality healthcare.
Thank you, Director. Michelle Jovis will address Council in person and is speaking against the recommendation. Michelle, please approach the lectern. You have 2 minutes to speak.
Thank you. This was the hot ticket issue in Sherborne Ward during the recent election and garnered considerable community concerns, with 58 objections, mainly around it being a 24/7 inpatient residential service. If it was a day program only centre, as outlined as another treatment offering on the applicant's webpage, many of their fears and concerns would be allayed. This premises does not appear to be fit for purpose. From the plans in the meeting attachments, the premises has only 4 bedrooms and not 5 as indicated by the applicant. If 4 bedrooms are being utilised by inpatients, what accommodation is provided to the staff member? Claims to have 3 bedrooms. This is misleading as there is only 2 toilets. Egress from the upper level bedrooms and potentially the classroom would need to be approved by Fire Rescue Victoria, and this might not be straightforward given the removal of the internal staircase. And I'm asking, why was this staircase removed, and what is the fire rating construction of the external stairs? Exit egress distances have increased with increased likelihood of equipment impediment. How does the site provide adequate recreational space for residents with 2 small first floor balconies and part of the rear courtyard that is also utilised for car parking? And, you know, it's normal for these types of premises to have open space so that residents can enjoy open space and gardens. This building is a multi-class building, Class 5, Class 1B, and potentially 9C, and has advice from Fire Rescue Victoria been sought, and why hasn't that been included in the application? I have numerous concerns about Rehab Delta, their expertise, experience, level of knowledge, the qualifications that the people hold, and but I'm running out of time. I'm also concerned that the Montmorency Community Hub space at 7 Wellington Street, which is only 50 metres away, there's no record of consultation on the application, and I'd be interested to hear what they have to say.
Thank you, Michelle.
Okay, well, I just wanted to say that maybe council could consider limiting the hours of operation to a day program. And, that might solve some of the issues, because clearly there's a need for such a service, and clearly there is support, but there's just concern about the location and fit for purpose.
Thank you. I was going to ask a question, but you go first, Councillor Champion.
Thanks very much, Mayor. The Speaker had quite a lot of questions and points to make, and I was just wondering if we could have the appropriate officer respond to some of those thoughts.
Thank you. And one of them for me being the amount of bedrooms.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. There are a number of questions regarding the internal layout of the facility and how it operates. Council staff did reach out to the applicant to understand the sleeping arrangements for staff within the development. So there's 2 levels over the facility, and our understanding is that the lounge level that's provided at one of the levels is actually more of a multi-purpose staff space. So they'll use it as an office, as a sleeping quarters, as a range of options there. So the bedrooms within the floor layout are dedicated for those people that are in the facility to receive the services. With respect to a number of the internal arrangements regarding stairways, fire ratings, the class of the buildings, all of those are dealt with through the building permit process that would come after the planning process. So planning concerns itself with the nature of the use and any potential amenity impacts it might have on the surrounding area, but not the building itself. That would be like any other modification to a building where building permits are required when the use of the building changes. And lastly, in respect of the open space areas, it's effectively short stay accommodation. Residents are only in residence for around 28 days. Those balcony spaces do provide the opportunity to be outside. I would say they're not oddly dissimilar to, say, a hotel or another arrangement where that's short stay. It would certainly be quite unusual to provide or mandate the provision of large amounts of private open space for short stay residents, because they're only there for a short period of time.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor McKern. Question?
Thank you to the Speaker, Michelle Jovis. Given the concerns raised by the Speaker in relation to the number of objectors, 58 I think she said, is there scope for community education via, say, small group workshops to address community concerns and provide some education around rehabilitation, what it is and how it differs to, say, safe injecting rooms and detox program? Could that be taken on notice?
We're just debating through you, Mayor, as to which is the relevant officer. We think it's probably both of us. In respect to the concept of education, absolutely, we could take that on board, and we'd be happy to meet with any residents who have concerns about the development. We note that in a number of the objections, there are a range of issues raised about the nature of the use of the development, and we are somewhat hopeful that the officer report that spells out the nature of the use and the conditions that are proposed in the recommendation for Council's consideration about how that might be managed has gone some long way to satisfying some of those initial concerns, that without the proper checks and balances in place, a facility like this could, it in theory, turn into something else. But certainly there's a role for us in educating our community. I feel like a lot of the work that's coming also with our municipal health and wellbeing plan and other council plan opportunities also provide other opportunities to help engage with the community about what range of services are available in this space as well. Anything to add?
Yeah, through you, Mayor. So some of the research which was undertaken by officers confirms that there are observed funding cuts and service demand issues across our municipality, particularly for alcohol and other drug-related services. So practitioners from both Banyule Community Health, one of our partners, and also Austin Health have reported an increased demand for alcohol and other drug services across Banyule. We also know that liquor consumption at home is a significant concern across the state as it occurs in a much less regulated environment, potentially leading to higher levels of harmful consumption. and also through the development of the Banyule Futures community consultation exercise, which is underway, which is looking at the community vision as well as developing the council plan. Residents have expressed significant concern about the prevalence of alcohol and drug use in the community. Concerns have been raised about the congregation of individuals affected by alcohol and other drugs in public spaces such as shopping strips and public facilities, and the community has specifically called for more targeted alcohol and drug services and a reduction in the number of alcohol outlets and sales in Banyule. So in summary, what we are hearing from the community is a need for an increased provision of services of this nature, and that aligns with all the most recent engagement the council has conducted to date.
Councillor O'Kane.
Through you, Mayor, I have 3 questions and a comment. So the first one is, how long ago was this building actually a residential building? And is there any real, I mean, I think there were conditions around parking, rubbish disposal bins, storage, things like that. How different is that actually from when it was a residential building? That's the first one. The second one is kind of a smaller one, but we're talking, there was questions around traffic and parking. And I'm just wondering if the on-site park, if that space is going to be used for parking, how convenient is it to use that space? Because my understanding is if spaces are not convenient to use, they cause trouble. It's difficult. People are going to park on the streets anyway, regardless of whether it's been designated or not. Probably the more significant question is this facility actually going to impact how residents will live in their daily lives? Will it impact how they are in their dwellings or their traffic or their parking? Is there any kind of material impact on those things? My last one is really a comment, and I think it's about how we as a community we're very quick to raise a lot of fears, and I think one of the fears that was generally talked about was kids in schools walking past or whatever. But my thoughts are that kids are already exposed to these things in their homes all the time, their neighbours, their extended family or whatever. It's a health issue. It's primarily a health issue. And I just, how is it that we can possibly see these desperately needed facilities as a healthy space in our societies as well, and just kind of transform the way we think about it as well? That's my comment, yeah. Thank you.
Through you, Mayor. So I understand that the top floor of this building was or has been used under the previous lease as a residential use. As to whether it's more intensely used than the proposed use would be difficult to say, because I wouldn't have that understanding of the number of residents that resided in that building, and certainly that's not something that planning would have managed. So the site has a number of buildings on it, and each of them are leased for different purposes. It has a reasonably unique offering of parking in the back, which is not out of place with an older development like this as well, where each of the little segments has access to parking. We are located directly opposite the train station. We know that the people who remain in residence don't drive to the site. It's required that they be dropped off, and that's part of the operational plan. So from a parking perspective, given its proximity to the shopping centre and the available parking in the area, we don't hold those concerns. And certainly it would be a private matter between the 3 tenancies to ensure that they are using the spaces that they have allocated for each other and not blocking each other in the back. And some of the amendments that are recommended in the conditions go to making sure that that's sort of spaced out. In terms of amenity impact to the adjoining residents, it is a residential care type of use, so it'd be an interesting question as to whether they would notice any difference in terms of the coming and going on this property than the previous residents who were there. Again, it probably goes to understanding the nature of how many people occupied, and I don't know how often they went to and from the property, but certainly there are very low numbers of staff and residents comparative to all the shops that are within that centre. So I would think it would be unlikely that you would notice a significant increase in activity than, say, the shops on the ground floor and the other activity that's happening in that part of Montmorency. Yeah.
Okay, I'll just hold, councillors. We have one more speaker and then we'll have questions. Jai Sanford will address council in person and he's speaking for the recommendation. Thank you, Jai. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. I was enjoying the questions, that was good. As it says in the agenda, approximately 64% of Banyule residents are at risk of long-term harm from alcohol consumption, which is higher than the state average. And this rehab centre will clearly provide that much-needed support to locals and others needing, and others along the Hurstbridge line because it's so close to Monty Station. I think council is leading with a great health first approach by, if they supported this, it's interesting that Victoria Police was contacted, considering this should be treated as a health issue, not a criminal one. And a lot of the objections from the proposal seem to stem from misunderstandings or, someone has to say it, a bit of NIMBYism. In my opinion, when we look at the facts of this, albeit it'd be better if it's public, but here we are, there's no real reason to block this valuable community health first service. Thank you.
Thank you, Jai. Councillor Curry.
Question, Mayor, to the relevant director. Could you give us an explanation of how council officers evaluated the project given the innominate use versus the commercial zone? Great, thanks.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. So for those watching at home and in the crowd, an innominate use is a use that doesn't meet a fixed definition that's provided for within the planning scheme. So it is, in this instance, this use is neither a medical centre, it's also not simply a residential dwelling. It sits in what the tribunal has termed a separate use as a private drug and alcohol rehabilitation clinic. Its use is most closely aligned to a community health or supported residential use, so you could think about it as being very similar to either of those. The land's in a commercial 1 zone. Being an innominate use, it's not prohibited, but it is a use that requires a permit. And I would say that much of the guidelines in that zone are still relevant to considering the impacts of this use as any other use that has a standard definition. But it's certainly quite unique and quite a different sort of way of considering a planning use on the site.
Councillor Curry.
It may have been partially answered in a question that was posed earlier, but the use of the car parks on site that are dedicated or said to be dedicated to this facility, the parking requirements are non-existent under the innominate use in the commercial zone, but there is a requirement for the parking to be to the satisfaction of the responsible authority. Could you comment on whether we can allow those parking spaces under a condition to remain as car spaces for the facility? Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor, and through you, Mayor. So the way the parking provisions in the planning scheme work is they set parking rates for specified uses. And not every use in the planning scheme, even the ones that are defined, has a parking rate. And where there is no parking rate, and in the case of an innominate use, there isn't because it's not defined, then council has to make its best judgment as to whether it feels that given the circumstances of the use, that the parking will be adequate. So our transport engineers gave consideration to what was the parking that was available, what are the number of people that are spending some time in the facility that might drive a vehicle, and what's the availability of parking and other transport options in the centre, and they formed the view that the parking arrangements would be satisfactory.
Councillor Di Pasquale.
Mayor, thank you. I was unclear of the comment that our final speaker made regarding the police. Could I please get clarification through you, if appropriate, of what that comment was with regards to notifying the police?
Yeah, thank you. And I think it was referred to in the documentation. Do we have a mover? Moved, Councillor McKern.
Sorry, Mayor, I still have some questions.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Champion.
And I think Councillor Rick, did you have some questions or not? Okay. I still have some questions.
Sorry, Councillor, I should have known.
That's okay. I know what you're doing. It's okay. Coming back to the inanimate use, you've explained what that is. I'd like us to understand a little bit more, Mayor, how council is sort of responsible. Where does council's responsibilities lie in an inanimate use building?
Thank you, Councillor, and through you, Mayor. The fact that the use is innominate doesn't impact our ability to manage it, so it simply becomes a use that requires a planning permit. And where a use requires a planning permit, we can then set conditions that we can enforce and to manage how the use occurs on the site. So its biggest exception is it's not prohibited and it's not as of right. So it is something that's, the use still requires permission.
Thank you for that. I actually have two more questions, Mayor, and they come from the community consultation which was held at the end of August. There are some concerns raised in the community regarding the location itself and the fact that it's close to schools, distractions, being in close proximity to, say, liquor shops, the American Candy Store which sells smoking products, as well as a significant distance from, say, the hospital or Banyule Community Health. So how would these concerns be relevant to this application, and what is their impact on the residents' rehabilitation in this location?
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. As we understand it, the program that's run on this facility is what's considered an abstinence-based rehabilitation. So there is no medical treatment that occurs within the facility. The residents are supervised. We understand they're reasonably closely monitored to detect whether there's any substance use that is occurring. They don't leave the facility without supervision. That's part of the program to ensure that they're managing their way through this period of time where they are in rehabilitation. And in that respect, they would just rely on the existing system and networks of ambulance, doctors and hospitals that exist within the municipality, like any other resident in the Montmorency area. I do note that there are a number of facilities that sell alcohol and cigarettes and other products of that nature in the neighbourhood, and I can only presume that as part of the program and the supervision, it's about navigating your life post an addiction in an existing community where those things are freely sold and available, and having the support of someone that can help you through that as part of that transition to sobriety.
Thank you very much. And one more through you, Mayor. What is the difference that you can see of the appropriate officer that you can see between this service and a safe injecting room?
Yeah, so a safe injecting facility is a medical, in part medically based, so it permits the use of drug consumption in a monitored medical setting. This program is an abstinence-based program, so it's probably the opposite of a safe injecting room. It's a space where drugs and alcohol are not permitted as part of the program to remove the addiction, whereas a safe injecting room is around a harm prevention and health approach to managing people in addiction whilst they're consuming drugs.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, councillors. I think there's been a lot of great questions this evening, and thank you to the officers without notice. So we're going back to this an agenda item, and we have a mover with a slight amendment, I believe. Thank you. Councillor McKern. Do I have a seconder?
Happy to second that, Mayor.
Thank you, councillor.
Thank you very much, Mayor. This is a very important matter and it's taken very seriously, shown by speakers and the number of questions raised by councillors. As mentioned, we know that 64% of Banyule residents are in risk of long-term harm from alcohol use, and that there is indeed a growing need for drug and alcohol support services in Banyule. I do appreciate the high level of community interest with 58 objections. And while it is an innominate use, it does require a planning permit, and my understanding is that the proposal does comply with Banyule's planning provisions. That is important to note. The comments I have to make are these. We need to be clear that the proposal is presented as relatively low risk. It's not a safe injecting room, nor is it a detox and withdrawal facility. I'm advised that clients accessing a rehab program, such as what's being proposed here, have already gone through a detox program and are accessing rehab as one of the final steps to recovery. Rehab is about people re-establishing their lives, and as is mentioned by the good director, the focus is on abstinence. So what does this mean? Indeed, it means that there's likely to be less substance use in a rehab centre than there is in a regular home. The proposal is small scale for 4 clients with staffing. So I'm wondering about the community concerns and what they're based on. Is it the perception around a stigma, lived experience? Is there research-based evidence? I can tell you that Ivanhoe has a drug and alcohol detox and withdrawal facility. How many of you would even know that? It's been in Ivanhoe for 20 years. It is a 16-bed facility, unlike this proposal of a small 4-person facility. And you'd be interested to know, fellow councillors, that it supports people from all over Banyule, including Montmorency, including Watsonia, including Greensborough. So 2 important messages have come from management of that detox facility in Ivanhoe, who I did take the time to talk to about this proposal. You wouldn't know that the Ivanhoe detox facility is there unless you needed to access it, because it sits quietly in our environment, in our community. It does not make an impost. In terms of safety, clients wanting to leave jump on the train or catch an Uber and go home. They do not go wandering around the streets or shopping centres. They're not hanging around or jumping people's fences. Should council reject a permit for this application, I'm concerned that the council would make a decision based on stigma and perception rather than reality and community need. I, for one, will be supporting this motion this evening. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, councillor. Does the seconder wish to speak?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Very happy to be supporting the mover and recommending that this be approved by the council. I'd like to thank all of our speakers, Melissa Dean in particular, Kirsten Jai and Michelle for an opposite opinion. I mean, it's important to have a diversity of views. I'm concerned that I heard reports that it had been politicised, this issue, but at the end of the day, this is a service. This is a service that is desperately needed in our community. And it's a service that, in a time that where costs are high, cost of business is high, that the private sector is looking to step in and invest. And yes, that will be utilised by people who have the means to be able to access that service. But it also hopefully means that that frees up capacity for those that are more in need without means to be able to get a spot in the public system. So this is a great outcome for our community, and I think through the Q&A we've heard here tonight, it's going to be very well managed and very low risk to the community. So I'm actually very proud, in fact, to be supporting this and to be having people who want to invest in Banyule and to set up services like this, and hopefully we can show that we're a council that backs these things in when done well. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, councillor. Councillor Castaldo.
Yeah, I won't go too long, but I'm supportive of this development moving forward as well. Like my fellow councillors have drawn on most of the important issues that, to be discussed. I didn't know what I'd see in the audience tonight with that number of objections to this application, but I was really glad to hear some people put across views just saying why and how important this service is, because we want a healthy Banyule and you never know when you're going to need this service. So I'm glad to see it peppered throughout Banyule to provide places that feel like you might be at home throughout our community, because it's really important that we address this as a health issue. It's not a police thing. It's not a high-risk thing. We need to support these people in these places of support. So I'm fully supportive of this as well.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd firstly like to thank and congratulate the applicant for their work in this space. I commend your efforts. 50 people a year attending this under their own intent and willingness is a really positive step for our community, and it's in line with the Banyule Wellness Strategy. So I will be supporting this motion tonight. These issues have no borders of locality to services or suburb or municipality. We are all in this. I again acknowledge the objectors and just make pull one quote from our officer's response, and that treatment is not a precursor to crime. This is really a positive step for our community. In the 2 weeks that we've been together as a group, we've talked about homelessness in Banyule and domestic violence, among other things, and drug and alcohol and gambling and other addictions are all part of a very, very complex space. And we should be celebrating and promoting these efforts, not putting barriers in the way of them. I'll always take responsibility for trying than standing by and not trying, doing nothing and dealing with those consequences. So I will be supporting this tonight. Well done.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Curry.
Thanks, Mayor. I do acknowledge that we had 58 objections, and it's really great for Council to hear all of those objections, because if there is a bit of misinformation, if there's a misunderstanding, if Council needs to come to the table and put in controls to assure the community that we have gone through due process, we need to do that. But at the same time, I hope that we can see that these people are not these people, because they might be us. They might be us that's coming to this facility and might have a need, and this might be a neighbour of yours that's struggling at home by themselves, that might be able to move into the facility and have a better success rate than what they're going to have at home. So I too welcome this facility. I think it's really good for the area. I think it will help us as a community to recognise that we have these problems within the community, within our communities. And I hope this facility does well. And when I wish the facility every success, I feel like I'm wishing our community every success, because helping them will help us as a community. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Curry. Councillor Champion.
Lovely, thank you, Mayor. Well, welcome to the new term. It's nothing like a challenging planning application to get you going. Thank you all very much to all the stakeholders and to my fellow councillors for all input on this application. Over the last few months, we've heard many different opinions, concerns, ideas, and arguments both for and against this application. Thank you especially to our speakers on this item tonight for your consideration, for expressing your consideration. I specifically would really like to thank our speaker for the item, Kirsten, who took the time to write to us on behalf of her close friend. That must have been a very challenging piece to write. We appreciate your honesty, your authenticity and your vulnerability. It must have been very hard for you to share your personal circumstances, your friends' personal circumstances publicly with us in this forum. So thank you very much for doing that. I appreciate the many questions and the concerns raised in the consultation at the end of August. Appreciate the emails and the phone calls since the advertising period. This is a planning application. And as stated in the report, some concerns unfortunately aren't considered. They're not planning issues. The planning concerns considered or raised in relation to parking, zoning, permit conditions, emergency vehicle access, land use have been addressed. They've been addressed tonight, they've been addressed since the community consultation, either by the officers' report or by the many questions asked tonight of our fellow councillors. So I thank you all very, very much for this conversation this evening. It has been very enlightening for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Champion. Councillor Di Pasquale.
Mayor, yes, thank you. Just, I think the way this process has been moved through has been quite adequate with regards on behalf of the community. I think we had the major objections that community came to the community consultation was they thought it was a injecting house or was some drug use facility. And I think the fact that we don't have many people here objecting in that way, like we had at that community consultation, leads us to understand that that has been communicated correctly in the community. And just the way that the facility operator went through the process of how they deal with the clients, in the facility while they're there, then also have a program afterwards at their home where they follow up with them at home as well. It becomes, I believe it's a 3-month in total program. And I think that's important that the community need to understand that, look, I think we do need facilities like this in our municipality, and we're going to be exploring next year with regards to the health and wellbeing plan whether we need more of these facilities, what they look like and how we need to combat addictions. It's going to be quite confronting next year when we go through the statistics of our community and the wider Melbourne, Victoria, Australian community, when we start to look at things like how many people are addicted to drugs in general, illicit drugs, prescription medications, it's just going up and up and up, alcohol, gambling. I mean, we're always taken aback by the amount of money that is put through our poker machines. The amount of money that's lost in our poker machines is equivalent to our rate dollar. That's how much it is on an annual basis. So when we are looking at these addictions, and then when we start to focus on things like domestic violence, etc., we can't just leave all these addictions out we cannot tackle the fundamental issues of how people treat each other with regards to domestic violence, etc., and not deal with the addictions, because they're a big part of it. So, this council here has a lot of work to do. We've got a lot of work to do, but we're ready for it. So, the community we're here to back the community, we're there to help the community as best we possibly can, and we need your guidance as well. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll just make a very brief comment. I'd like to thank all the speakers tonight for their contribution. We appreciate everyone's contribution. And also from our councillors, I must say I agree with most of what everyone has said tonight on this item, and I say that with pride. These services, and quoting the Deputy Mayor, should be peppered throughout the municipality, and this small facility is a small way forward to achieving this. I put the motion to a vote. All those in favour? The motion is carried. We now move on to items of general business. So I may start with Councillor O'Kane. Straight in, you've got an item of general business?
Right. General business as in a meeting that I've attended?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mayor. Last Friday, I had the great pleasure of attending the Reconciliation Banyule AGM. And congratulations to Kate Noble for her election that evening as president, the new president. There's a new generation of leadership that is being fostered and emerging within the Aboriginal rights movement, and it's really incredible to see the number of young people that are being involved, and also the intergenerational engagement and working together. It's a movement with life and energy and dynamism that's really going to be effective, I think. And it was also supported by a very significant number of community people, and it was a really thrilling event, so thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Now move to the Deputy Mayor, Councillor Castaldo.
I'd just like to quickly touch on that. It was a wonderful event. It's come a long way, the reconciliation community, in the last 8 years since I've been on council, and I think the old guard will be very happy to see the new ones taking over. I just acknowledge that I was there, and Alida McKern was also present as well. Secondly, there was a very special event. The historic treaty negotiations begin in Victoria. I had the honour of being invited as the representative for Banyule City Council to the ceremony where every traditional owner group, for the first time in recent memory, met from across the state. I don't know if I've ever been to such a beautiful ceremony, connecting people of all ages and the land in a beautiful now beautiful shared Darebin Parklands. The fine words were said that we all have much to gain when our First Nations culture is woven into our rich cultural fabric, and I must say that I left that place really excited about the opportunities that present themselves when we realise our long history and connect with a tremendous amount of culture that existed for many tens of thousands of years before we were here. So I'm very excited to see where we go.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. We have another Councillor Alison Champion has 2 items.
Thank you, Mayor. I celebrated with Lower Plenty Primary School 150 years old at the end of October, and we celebrated that at the school. We were treated to a smoking ceremony and a panel of past students from the 1960s through to last year who shared their experiences of the school, social, education, different teacher styles and different forms of punishment, which have actually dissipated over the years. So the student from last year has no idea what they're all talking about. We had the opportunity to share birthday cake, to sing happy birthday and to walk around the school. I had the privilege of experiencing the original school building, which is a little weatherboard single classroom with an ante-room, which has been renovated and placed in an easily accessible site on the school grounds. The building now displays photos and instruments and memorabilia of life of its 150 years. It was a pleasure hearing past students share their joyful memories as a primary student, including those who were in the same class as Wilbur Wilde and his brother. The Lower Plenty Primary School is the only state government-based Montessori school and does have spaces for students in 2025 if you're looking to enrol your child in a small Montessori school. Second activity, Remembrance Day on the 11th, obviously, held at Montmorency Monty Eltham RSL, gets bigger every year. This was attended by veterans and their families, by local school students, residents and political representatives from all parties. So this is a day that brings community together to acknowledge previous generation sacrifices, celebrates achievements and our freedoms, and remembers those who died, specifically in World War I and other wars which followed. On a light note, every year the Monty Eltham RSL also holds an artwork competition for the local primary schools, and this year 4 primary schools participated in it. Congratulations to Monty Primary School for winning this year. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor, for those reports. Councillor Curry.
Thanks, Mayor. I'm being a bit cheeky because the event I attended was actually prior to my becoming a councillor. But I wanted to give a shout out to the Banyule Open Studios, which I attended on the 12th and the 13th of October. The program has been running since 2021, so we are only 3 years old. and Felicity Gordon, who is the current president. In 2024, they had 24 studios open to the public with up to 2,000 visits. I managed to attend 3 of those studios, being Kalina in Heidelberg, Josephine in Montmorency, and I picked up this beautiful piece, which I'm not showing off to best advantage, from Deb Bowen's studio in Rosanna. And so I love going to these events. I also went to a talk by Philip Howe on his process, a fantastic local artist, and you'll know his work from the Lower Plenty sculpture that we have. So I look forward to more from them. If you'd like more information, then they have a website, www.banyulopenstudios.com.au, and I look forward to the next event. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Curry. Councillor McKern.
Thank you, Mayor. There's 21.5 hectares of land on the banks of the Yarra, now known as the Birrarung, that's known as Wilson's Reserve in Ivanhoe. It exists thanks to the foresight and commitment to community by residents Chris Bailey and Skipper Wilson, who innovated a program for the public purchase of private land 100 years ago for the purpose of youth activities, particularly the Ivanhoe Sea Scouts. So it is 100 years since Heidelberg City Council obtained the title of the land in 1924 as Ivanhoe's first riverside reserve. So this year was the centenary celebration, and it was held on the 17th of November. In attendance were the Friends of Wilson's Reserve, headed up by their very capable president, Robert Bender, and as well as our Bushland Management Unit staff working in conjunction. And it's so good to see the Friends of Wilson's Reserve working well with our Bushland Management Unit. And I'd like to give a shout out to the staff who were there, Chris Callahan, Jared, Eliza and Nathan. Also in attendance were 3 councillors, myself, Councillor Castaldo and Councillor Curry. And last but not least, the Ivanhoe Sea Scouts. How could a celebration of this type ever be complete without them? I'm very lucky to have this reserve, thanks to the amazing foresight of our forebears. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Garotti.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. If I may, just wanted to acknowledge the successful Mullahang Festival that occurred on Sunday the 17th of November. It's always a terrific event in the calendar of Banyule, and we were treated to some terrific performances on the day, including one by Crescendo Bandura and other choirs from our local primary schools. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Mayor. I had the great honour of joining my new colleagues on Friday and representing the council group at the Walk Against Family Violence March in the City, put on by Respect Victoria. It was a very moving day. There was people speaking there that victims of domestic violence and survivors and families. I was really proud to recently joined this organisation and have representation from every department at Banyule Council, and importantly there was a lot of men there. I hate to pull the gender card, but in this instance I think it's appropriate that this conversation has got to be within the men. So I was very proud to be there flying the flag for Banyule Council. Thank you.
Thank you to all councillors for your reports. Now we have 4 public questions, and if any members of the public are in the gallery who have a public question, they are welcome to approach the lectern and ask their public question when their name is read out. For those who have a public question who are not present, their question will not be read out, but they will be in the minutes of the meeting, later available on the website. The first question is from Sheldon Williams from Rosanna. Is Sheldon here? No? So the answer will be provided to Sheldon in the minutes. The second question is from Dora Bergman in Ivanhoe. Thank you, Dora. If you please ask your question.
Good evening. I would like to know how does council can justify having 3 different town planning overlays in one small street and use those town planning overlays as valuation, and at least 2 of them have the same valuation?
Thank you, Dora. We have Natasha Swan, the Director of City Development, to answer.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. The question provided didn't have any reference to valuation, so I don't have any response in relation to that question. But in respect to the number of different overlays, so under the Victorian planning provisions, they set out how planning controls are applied to land, and under these provisions, each property should have 1 planning zone, but can have multiple planning overlays. Planning overlays in Victoria seek to achieve a number of different outcomes. These outcomes can relate to design, heritage protection, environmental conservation and enhancement, flood mitigation and development levies, among others. Due to the broad range of matters that the planning scheme protects, it is not unusual for streets like Abbotsford Grove to have a number of different overlays. For example, an environmental significance overlay only applies to the western end of the street due to its proximity to the Darebin Creek. There is no ability to combine overlays to achieve multiple outcomes in one provision, and this is consistent with most metropolitan planning schemes in Victoria.
Sorry, we don't engage in discussion during the questions, but we can speak to you after the meeting. Okay, thank you. We'll address particularities after the proceedings. The next person to have a question, Stephen Cullen from Ivanhoe. Thank you, Stephen. If you'd like to read your question.
Thanks, Mayor. I'll bring my question as a resident of Banyule, but also as a recently appointed President of the Friends of Eaglemont Village. And on behalf of the Friends of Eaglemont Village, Mayor, we pass our congratulations on to all of the councillors, to yourself and Deputy Mayor on your recent elections and appointments. My question, Mayor, is as we are now almost halfway through year 2 of the Community Infrastructure Plan 2023 to 2033, which was adopted in June 2023, can Council please advise when the Eaglemont community can expect to be engaged to address needs and options for multi-purpose meeting spaces, which is action 8.1 of the plan and was included in the implementation plan for years 1 and 2 at that June 2023 meeting. Thanks, Mayor.
So the question to be answered by Director of Community Wellbeing, Joseph Tobacco.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. Thank you for the question, Stephen. To clarify, the Community Infrastructure Plan specifies Action 8.1 for implementation in years 1 to 3, not 1 to 2. A needs analysis is required to determine the current demand for multi-purpose meeting spaces so that future needs can be determined, and this work is currently scheduled to commence in the latter stages of the year 3 of the implementation plan, so we'll be in touch shortly.
Thank you. The next question is from Pippa Griffith from Ivanhoe East. Pippa, if you would like to ask your question.
Thank you, and I would like to congratulate you all on your election or re-election. Welcome to the new faces on council, and I look forward to working with you over the next term. Can council please explain why, when searching for the significant tree register on the council website, it links to the 2011 document when the register has been updated more recently than 2011?
Thank you. Director Swan.
Thank you for your question, and thanks for bringing this to Council's attention. So the link on the web page is pointing to the wrong document. You're correct, the significant tree register has been more recently updated, and we're working through an update to this link as soon as possible. Might already be done. Further, the last update to the Banyule planning scheme that gives effect to the register was approved in October 2022.
Thank you. Thank you to residents for your questions. There are other opportunities to ask questions. Just contact your local councillor, send us an email, we're happy to help. There is no confidential meeting tonight, and I now close the meeting at 9:40 p.m. Thank you to everyone in the gallery. Thank you for your attendance online. The next Ordinary Council meeting will be held on Monday, the 9th of December this year. Thank you.